Welcome to the Coastal Conservancy's North Coast Program Office Hours. We'll be giving a short presentation and answering your questions about funding available through the 2024 Climate Bond, aka Prop 4. This will be a short presentation summarizing information we shared in our March 17th webinar. You can find that webinar on our website. We're not going to be covering the Conservancy's Explore the Coast or Coastal Stories grant programs. There are resources and recorded webinars on our website to learn more about those programs. So let's start by the Conservancy staff introducing ourselves. I'm Joel Gerwine. I'm the North Coast Regional Manager.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Townsville, and I am a project manager.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fanny Yang, and I'm also a North Coast project manager.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lily Allen. I am also a North Coast project manager. I specialize in wildfire resilience.
I'm Michael Bowen, Deputy Program Manager for the North Coast.
Good morning, everyone. Hannah Barty, North Coast Project Manager, specializing in Great Redwood Trail projects.
Peter Charouche, also a project manager on the North Coast.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the Conservancy's North Coast Program Office Hours. The North Coast region and the Conservancy covers the ocean draining portions of Marin and Sonoma counties and Mendocino, Humboldt, and Del Norte counties, as well as coastal watersheds draining to the North Coast. So in Sonoma and Marin, the bay draining areas are covered by the Bay program. The Conservancy's other regions are having separate office hours, and you can see the dates and times of those office hours on our website. So first, a quick clarification about who is eligible for Conservancy grants. That would be local, state, or federal public agencies, including federally recognized tribes, and nonprofits, and other groups like community organizations and non-federally recognized tribes that aren't nonprofits could apply through a fiscal sponsor. So let's talk about the bond. It was approved by voters in November 2024 and provides $10 billion for natural resources and climate resilience activities. The $10 billion is divided among program areas such as clean water, wildfire resilience, biodiversity, and coastal resilience. There's $1.2 billion for coastal resilience in the bond, and much of that will be coming to the Conservancy for distribution through grants and contracts. 40% of the climate bond funds must directly benefit disadvantaged communities and vulnerable populations, and 10% of that has to benefit severely disadvantaged communities. So now talking about the appropriation to the Conservancy in the bond, there's almost $950 million in the climate bond for the Conservancy to use for grants. And that money is broken into several different program areas. The largest pot is for coastal flooding and for coastal resilience. The other pots are for specific geographies or programs. And we'll go over some of these different pots in a moment. The bond will fund similar work to what we've been doing over the past few years with the general fund coastal resilience funding, and will continue to support our goals and objectives identified in our strategic plan for 2023 to 2027, which is on our website and discussed in the March webinar. The focus of the climate bond is climate resilience and meaningful benefits to vulnerable communities. Projects addressing climate change and benefiting disadvantaged communities will rise to the top. And now the first and largest pot in the bond, in our bond funds, is for coastal flood management, $350 million. So that funding will support coastal and combined coastal and river flood management projects. We're looking for multiple benefit projects that will improve public safety and shoreline resilience. And those projects can address both current flooding and future flooding due to sea level rise. This funding is specific for projects located within developed shoreline areas, including areas with critical community infrastructure such as roads and ports. And the funds are targeted for multiple benefit projects that include strategies such as engineering with nature or nature-based features, although we can also fund gray infrastructure projects for coastal flood management with these funds. We'll prioritize living shorelines type of approaches. So these funds are limited in the areas where they can be spent in the North Coast. Some examples of eligible areas would be Humboldt Bay, Crescent City, Noyo Harbor, Lower Russian River, and Bodega Bay. And there's other areas as well, but not as abundant as in other parts of the state. The bond also includes $415 million for coastal resilience projects. 85 million of that is specifically for San Francisco Bay, so 330 million for the rest of the coast. And the coastal resilience funds can be used for a much broader set of activities compared to the coastal flooding funds that we were just talking about. The resilience funds are for projects that protect, restore, and increase the resilience of beaches, bays, coastal dunes, wetlands, coastal forests, watersheds, trails, and public access facilities. So this specifically includes projects to adapt to climate change and sea level rise, to protect coastal lands and restore habitats, nature-based projects to minimize flooding, erosion, and runoff, and also lower cost coastal accommodations. So for this category also, we'll be prioritizing multi-benefit projects, innovative climate resilience projects, projects that further goals that are stated in that are in state plans, and projects that benefit vulnerable communities. There's also $33.5 million for wildfire resilience in the bond to the Conservancy. And those funds are getting rolled out much faster than the rest of the funding in the climate bond. The legislature appropriated $30 million of those funds to the Conservancy just in the last month. So we'll be front loading projects using these funds, hopefully in the next year or two. There's a high demand for this funding in heavily populated areas of the state, but some of these funds will also be available to the North Coast. And priorities for these projects are going to include implementation projects, although we will also fund planning, projects that incorporate workforce development, projects that incorporate partnership with tribes. They benefit disadvantaged communities, bringing back good fire on the land, and again, multi-benefit projects. That's a theme. We'll have a webinar dedicated to our wildfire program on May 21st. And there's you can register for that when there'll be a link on our website, but also on this slide deck that we'll be posting to our website later. So let me just run through some examples of priority projects that would be a fit for the bond. And these are projects that we have funded. Somehow we ended up selecting only projects around Humboldt Bay. So apologies for that. We are funding projects in the rest of the North Coast too. Anyway, one example is this Coastal Resilience Planning for Frontline Communities on Humboldt Bay project. This is a planning project for the communities of King Salmon and Fields Landing, which are both underserved communities that are right on the bay and have a lot of flooding issues. They incorporate community and tribal engagement, vulnerability assessment, and get us to conceptual designs and preliminary engineering plans for adaptation projects. So one thing to point out there, we're funding planning, but we want our funds to get as close as possible to teeing up projects that can go to implementation. Hannibal Island Marsh Restoration Project. This is kind of a traditional tidal marsh restoration in one sense in the Eel River Delta and the Eel River Wildlife Area. But it does also have benefits for adjacent ag lands and includes elevation of an adjacent road. So there's a bit of a sea level rise adaptation piece there as well. Kind of a living shorelines project in that way. Another example that's a trail project is Humboldt Bay Trail South. This is a great coastal resilience project that will provide a much needed trail corridor that will be used for recreation and also commuting, and should really reduce the car trips between Arcata and Eureka. And it's paired with this Humboldt Bay Living Shoreline Planning Project that will restore, it's do planning for restoration and creation of tidal marsh that will protect part of the trail and the 101 corridor that's vulnerable. A couple more projects that are south of Eureka in the Elk River watershed. One project that's we funded through the city of Eureka was, again, a tidal marsh restoration project that incorporated a mile of trail and also provides protection for Highway 101 and some other infrastructure as well. And then the Elk River Habitat Restoration Project, that's an acquisition and planning project that you can see in the bottom, some of the project area on the other side of 101. And that project includes a land back component to the Wiyot tribe. And in addition to the wetlands restoration that is being planned for, there's an opportunity to potentially adapt some infrastructure for sea level rise as well. So those are some project examples. Hopefully that gives you a flavor of some of the things that would be priorities for funding under the bond. Let me tell you a little bit about this coming fiscal year's budget and the governor's allocations from the bond in this budget. So the governor's budget included $110 million in climate bond funds for the Conservancy. And then the legislature, as I mentioned, added another $25 million in wildfire funding. So that brings the total to $135 million for the coming fiscal year that we can start putting into grants once those we get a final budget in July. So we expect to get climate bond funds annually in the budget over the next 5 to 10 years. And that rollout will allow us to provide sustained support for communities as they plan and implement projects to address climate change. The first appropriation to the Conservancy will be received in July when the budget is signed, but we're already accepting applications, and those applications are open on a rolling basis. Since we're accepting applications at any time and we don't have a deadline, that means you should apply for funding when you're ready, not on our timeline. Our board approves funding at 4 or 5 public meetings each year. The first board meeting that would be possible for approval of climate bond funds is the mid-September 2025. And it's possible that we'll have to wait till November for our first climate bond funded grants. Just depends on some of the other processes that Department of Finance and the State Treasurer's Office has to go through to approve our use of the bond funds. We have resources and guidance for you to help you with the application process. There's more information on that in our March 17th webinar. Again, the recording is on our website. But our general aim is to just try to make the process as easy and efficient for you all as possible. And you can find on our website a grant application guide with a complete set of instructions, templates for the pre-application and the full application, a web page on technical assistance, which has links to lots of resources like webinars on how to write a successful application, info you'll need to know to manage your grant if you receive one, and tips on meaningful community engagement, workforce development, and lots more. I also want to let you know we do have a grantee manual on our website, which provides a very detailed description of how our grants work. You don't need to read it at the application stage, but if you have specific issues that you really want to dig into, that could be a useful resource for you. In addition, the regional managers and any Conservancy staff are available to give feedback on initial project ideas to help determine eligibility and fit with available funding. So you should definitely feel free to reach out with questions and ideas. And that is the end of the presentation. Okay, well, thanks so much for everyone for coming. Thanks, North Coast team, for being awesome. And have a great rest of your day.